Test, test, test. Yes, ma'am. You're driving? All right. Welcome, everyone. It is. We gave a few extra minutes in case people were still wandering in. But it's a couple minutes after 6, so we're going to go ahead and start. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to run you through the first few slides today, and then the board is going to take a few slides and run us through the rest of them, and then we'll wrap up and do questions at the end. So we're going to give a full budget overview, which will be a little bit more in depth maybe than the public hearing. And then we also have Tom Tant with us from Hazen and Sawyer to talk a little bit about our water and sewer system specifically, to give you that information, just based on some of the questions that we've been asked the last couple of weeks. It'll be a good way to answer a few of those, or maybe spur some more questions. So let's start off. I'm Will Lewis, And then we have 4 of our commissioners here today. We'll start at that end. We've got Brenda down at this end, Tyrone, Mark, and Cynthia. Danny had a little emergency this evening and was supposed to be here, but is not able to be here now, so we're going to do his part for him. Next slide, Chad. So a lot of y'all, I see a lot of familiar faces. You've been to listening sessions. You've been where we talk about this. So I'm going to move through this relatively quickly, but this is our overall City of Havelock org chart, where it's the citizens elect a mayor and commissioners. Mayor and commissioners hire a city manager. It's the only employee that actually works for the board. Every other employee works for the city manager. All right? This is our mission, core values, and I'm not going to belabor it. A lot of y'all have seen this a bunch. It's also on our website. But we're going to work together to enhance quality of life and deliver efficient, high-quality services while providing for growth and responsible development. And so that first sentence really, I think, is the one that's most important when the board is doing things like creating a budget, choosing what project we might fund, et cetera, is looking at that first sentence. All right? All right, this is for perspective. So this is for fiscal year 25-26, which ends June 30th. We have 138 employees, 47.4 miles of streets that we take care of, and so we have a shared responsibility for that with DOT. So think Highway 70, McCotter, Belltown, Fontana. Those are all owned by DOT, not by us. We just remind them what needs to be done there or partner with them. All the other streets are the ones that are ours. We're basically 6.3 square miles, 12 parks, and that's everything from City Park to the Recreation Center to smaller parks like Sermons Park, Tar Heel, the community parks. We have 12 of those. There are 5,966 utility customers. So that's folks that pay water and sewer. We have almost 6,000 of those. That includes the businesses, the non-residential in town. We have 80 miles of sewer main. That is not a typo. We do have more sewer main than we have street. Our population right now is 18,193. That's up about 800 from last year. And just real quick on the population, we've talked about this before, but our population changes with the installation because they are a part of our city limits. We've been as high as just over 20,000 population, bumping 21, 22. And then with the A6s sundowning and then the Harrier sundowning, we went as low as 16,000 and change. We are now coming back out of that as the F-35 squadrons are arriving. We're already back up to just over 18,000 folks that live in the city, and that number is projected to be back to 20,000 by 2030. And then the average home value in Havelock is $186,300. We don't make that up. The county tells us that. The way it works is we set a levy, but the county does the assessment and the tax appraisals. The county collects the taxes and gives them back to us. So the county tells us what our average home value is in Havelock, and that's $186,300. I know some of you in the room are probably like, my house is worth more than that. It might be. And there's some houses in Havelock that are worth less than that. This is the average. This is the average home value. All right, Chad? Our general fund tax rate right now is 72 cents. Our ad valorem tax base is $1 billion. So what does ad valorem tax base mean for the perspective of $1 billion? Just to give you an example, this morning we were told, for example, we have 18,000 people. Our tax base is $1 billion, but Pine Knoll Shores, for example, their tax base is $2 billion, even though they have a population of 1,500, because their average property value is way higher than ours. And that matters because the math is how you end up knowing what you actually pay. And I've given this speech before, so I'll give the Cliff Notes version. The rate is immaterial. The levy, what you actually pay, is what matters. So it's as simple as if I asked you if you wanted to give me, if you wanted to give me 5% of 1,000 or 50% of 1,000,000, right? You're going to, or in this case, 50% of 1,000 or 5% of 1,000,000. You're going to give me 50% all day. I'll give you the $500. I don't want to give you 5% of 1,000,000 because that's a way bigger number. The percentage is just a multiplier. What you actually pay is what matters. So our tax base is lower than most of our communities. The average, we are probably one of the lowest average home values in the area at 186. It's because we haven't had a lot of new development for the last 2 decades. So that means the multiplier is larger to get the same amount of money. Our value of 1 cent. So when we raise taxes by 1 penny, and you're talking about just property value of homes, it gets us about $99,000. So a 1 cent tax rate brings an extra $99,000 into the city of Havelock. Our general fund right now is $17.6 million. Our water fund, $3.9. Our sewer fund, $6.1. Solid waste, $1.4. Stormwater, $535. The building you're in is about $660,000 a year budget, and then your E911 is $185. I'm going to start at the bottom and go backwards on what those are. E911 is a very restricted line item of funding that we receive from the state. When you see your phone bill, it used to be on your landline, now it's on your cell phone bill. You pay that little small percentage at the bottom that goes to the state of North Carolina. They then have an algorithmic formula that sends some of that back to us. And we can only spend that for E911 services. So something related to telecommunications, dispatch, things like that. Very restricted fund. It's also very small. We get a very small amount of money every year. Tourist and Event Center and all the others are listed separate from the general fund for a reason. The general fund is an account that is used as a service account to you. Everything else is an enterprise fund. They're all supposed to be run as a business. So Tourist and Event Center, we run this like a business. You pay a rate if you want to use it, and that rate is a market rate to pay for the people, the equipment, and the things like that that you rent to be here. Stormwater, same thing. And most of you, well, everybody in here that has a residence, you're paying the same $4, and we all pay the same $4 for that. If you have a business, it's a little bit different. Mark will get into that later. Solid waste, that's the fund where we pay that $20 and change every month, and you get all your blue can pickup, your green waste, brown waste, white goods off the side of the road. That fund operates on its own. The part you pay in your utility bill is that line item and that line item alone. Your sewer and your water are exactly the same as that. What you pay, the reason when you look at your utility bill you see water and sewer separate is what you pay for water is to run the water fund, and that is supposed to be run like a business. State of North Carolina requires that. We're supposed to charge the rate that actually runs the water plant. Same for the sewer. That's why they're two different rates. All right, next slide. Okay, this is a quick budget schedule. I won't belabor this too much. A lot of you have already seen this, and you already kind of know this. Our budget really is an all-year process, but our fiscal year runs from July 1 to June 30. Staff really starts work in December, and then by January, they're starting to put together all of their capital outlay requests and major program requests. And then in March and April, staff locks down, and they start building what the budget needs to be, and then start taking immediate cuts to try to get down to a regular tax level. Then in April and May, the board starts digging into it and working with staff to try to see how they can change the budget or work the budget to get whatever they desire. June is a heavy month of meetings. Some of y'all in here have been to both of them. We have workshops. We have our public hearing. We choose to do a listening session. Only the public hearing is required by law. We do this because it's more interactive and we can give you a little bit more information time-wise. Then we have to approve a budget by June 30. So this year, it's usually the last Monday of the month. We give ourselves maximum amount of time to get feedback from you and then adjust the budget. So this time, our meeting for that will be June 22nd. The board has added in a workshop, which will be Wednesday, June 10th. And that is to take all the input that we get today, all the input we receive from the public hearing, and then for the board to go into a workshop and talk about what they want the final version of the budget to look like based on what we've heard from our citizens, and then for the 22nd for approval. Then July 1, we start it all right back over again. All right? And then this is an overview of the budget to start perspective on what they're going to dive into a little bit deeper. So right now, as the budget sits presented, the proposed budget right now would show a 3-cent tax increase. That started at 6 cents, and the board has moved some things around and cut a few things and paid for some things out of general fund to reduce that to 3. The user fee increases in permits of 3.3%. So any permit that you might get from the city would go up 3.3. That's not an arbitrary number. 3.3 comes from the consumer price index. That's based off inflation. So 3.3% would mean you would pay the same thing in today's dollars you paid last year for that same permit. Our enterprise funds are proposed right now to go up by 15% in water, 20% in sewer, 7.5% in solid waste, no change to stormwater, and the fees in this building to go to 10%. And that's to keep up with the market on that one. And we're going to dig into those a little bit deeper further in. All our state revenues are taken into account when we do the budget. So there are things that are not within our control. So think about, we used to get what was called an enterprise fee for people that have things in our right-of-way like cable, internet, electricity. We are given that money by the state. We don't always know what they are exactly, so we project those. And they're projected through the North Carolina League of Municipality forecast, which is a pretty accurate tool. And that helps us know what we might get from the state, but they're not always right. Just to use an example, our E911 that they predicted this year is going to come in considerably lower than it was projected, and we're going to have to make that money up somewhere else. But we're kind of looking at the crystal ball at that one. What does the state think we're going to receive? And then we don't know what's going to happen at the North Carolina legislative level. That does affect our budget, which is why it is there. We could pass a budget, the state could make a new law, we can immediately have to adjust our budget. The state typically puts mandates down that cost us money, and they don't fund those. So that means we have to fund them ourselves. So we either have to have the money in our own budget, or we have to create a way to fund them. Stormwater is an example of that. Our personnel changes by COLA, which is cost of living adjustment at 3.3%, again, based on the CPI. So that means $1 is $1. So it means all of our employees could buy the same amount of bread this year that they bought last year. And then 1.7 longevity. I think Brenda's going to get into that at the end, so I won't give all the logic behind the 1.7, but that is for employees that have been here for 1 year or more. There are 2 positional changes this year. In a restructuring that we're doing right now, we are actually eliminating 1 position from our current budget, and then the savings from that elimination is going to fund a nuisance and abatement officer going from part-time to full-time, and then safety coordinator position for the entire city and all of our 140 employees. And then if you look at the right, these are things that just cost us money that we don't necessarily get a say in, but we have to cover. So our retirement went up by 14.1%. That's the system we have to pay into as a state for all of our employees to be in the retirement system. And then our health insurance, we are self-funded. Some of y'all that have been to these before have seen that number be all kinds of crazy things. We are a self-insured pool. That has been a really good choice by the city. It has helped keep our health insurance costs very reasonable. So some years we're fortunate and we see a 0% change in our health insurance. But then, just for an example, if you have 4 or 5 employees that are going through major medical issues, cancer treatments, maybe a stroke situation or a major injury, you'll see that spike by 20 or 30% in 1 year. I think it was only a couple years ago we had a pretty large spike while we were covering that for our employees. Property insurance, we're seeing a 10% increase. We do have to put insurance on the things that we own, just like you do. We're seeing a 10% increase there. Workers' comp at 1%. We usually put together a contingency fund. We started that, 15 years ago, and it was when the first time gas prices were spiking like crazy. The manager was having to come back to the board regularly to ask for increases in the budget to cover those gas costs within the line items. And we decided we would create a contingency fund to give to a manager so the manager could use that for those things with approval from the board without having to call a special meeting. This one was budgeted at $50,000. The board decided to pull that $50,000 back in order, that gets you about half a penny on your tax rate. So they pulled that back and used it for something else to try to not increase taxes by that amount. Okay, that's kind of your overview. I'm going to pass it to Cynthia now, and she's going to run you through the next few slides, and then we'll switch to Mark.
Good evening, everyone. So the section that I have are slides that are going to discuss our fund reserve trends, as well as the fund balance and retained earnings, and of course the proposed budget. And if you look at the current fund reserves trends, you will notice that the general fund balance in 2015 was 5.7 million. And then, of course, if you go down a little further, you will see that in 2020, we were at 8.9 million. But then if you look at 2023, we're at 7.9. So it shows that we were trending down from the 8.9, because we went up again, but we went back down. But then in 2025 with the general fund, we had 12.5 million. And so the proposal for what's going on with 2026 is 9.7 million. And then when you look at the PAL fund, in 2015, it was 191,000. But then in 2019, we were at 785. 2023, 518. 2025, we had 1,107,000. But for 2026, we're looking at 576. And then, of course, if you look at the water section, we have 2.2 in 2015. 2019, 3.6. 2024, 5.6. But for 2026, we're looking at 3.9. And then, of course, excuse me, ma'am. Pardon me, ma'am. We're going to go through the slides, and then afterwards.
Well, you're talking about something that's not on the chart, so I'm asking the question. You're saying 2015, and it does not show on the chart.
Well, thank you for pointing that out. But the paperwork I have that paper that shows the 2015. So if you like, I won't bring up the 2015 for today. We'll just discuss the 2017. So I was in error for not mentioning the 2017 amount, but bringing more data into the conversation for 2015, because that's the starting point of where we're going with this from the 2015 conversation. But we can start with just the 2017 information. So in 2017, we have 2.3 for water. If you go up to 2020, we have 4.5. And then, of course, for 2025, we're looking at 5.5. And then 2026 is looking at 3.9. And if we go over to sewer, for 2017, you have 5 million. If you go down to 2023, you have 5 million. If you go down to 2024, you've got 4.4. But for 2026, it's looking at 2.3. We could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Now here we have the estimated fund balance and retained earnings. And what you'll see are the amounts that we started with the $12,254,198 for the general fund as of July 1st, 2025, with the current new estimate of May 15th, 2026 of $9,792,000. And if you're looking at the numbers, everything in red are smaller numbers than what's on top, the larger numbers. And if you see that red arrows, it's showing you that everything was going down. So there was money coming out. But with the money coming out, there was cost and expenses that we were able to use, and the majority of the costs and expenses that were paid were things that benefited our city. For instance, we were able to purchase ambulance. I don't know how many of you that went to the 250th birthday for Marine Corps in the park. We spent funds when there. We've had the firefighter grant match. We had streets and paving this year. I know a lot of citizens had wanted to have streets paved if this was a paving year. Some of the income, or rather some of the money went from the city manager severance package as well as the city manager surge, down to Parks and Recs having vehicles and the city park playground. And we just did the ribbon cutting on Friday for the city park playground. And then, of course, we've also had the Christmas tree. So according to the slide that's in front of all of us, the city of Havelock was in position to spend some of the money from out of the general fund, and you've always wanted to be able to spend it out of the general fund instead of being able to tax our citizens. But of course, we want to spend the money from the general fund when the city is healthy, when the fund itself is healthy. So you'll see there, we were able to make those types of purchases. And with the POW bill, that is the bill that helps us to pay for the paving. We don't pave every year. We try to pave every couple of years so that we can get a larger cushion, get a little bit more bang for the buck. And then, of course, water and sewer fund, that's a little self-explanatory. But you don't want to have a low water fund because we want to make sure in the event that there are emergencies or problems that there's enough in that fund. If you can go to the next slide, please. And then, of course, this slide shows you the budget year comparisons from the actual budget from 2024 to 2025 to the budget that we're in 2025 to 2026. So the budget that we're in 2025 to 2026 is not classified as the actual budget because we're still literally in this budget. The numbers could change if something was to occur that wasn't already listed or covered in this particular budget. And what I'd like to point out to you is in the actual budget for 2024 and 2025, we had $26,181,660. $181,660. But of course, for the budget of 2025 to 2026, we had $36,682,680. And then our proposed budget in 2026 to 2027 is actually smaller than the current budget that we're in. Our goal is not to just tax the citizens, but one of the reasons why we had a larger operating budget in 2025 and 2026 is because we had large grants that came in to help pay for some of the things that were needed, and so we optimized it and we used it during that time frame. And if we can go to the next slide. And then, of course, for 2026 through 2027, proposed budget fund balance used. We like being able, as I stated before, out of the general fund to fund items when it is healthy. But these are one-time items, you know, fire trucks, ambulance, things of that nature, things that you buy a fire truck once this year, and then you might have to buy a fire truck in another 10 or 15 years. So when the general fund is healthy, that's when we want to be able to make those types of purchases. And we had a healthier general fund, therefore we was able to make those types of purchases. We purchased an ambulance, 3 police vehicles, we had a backhoe tractor. So I guess the large point with me standing here that I want to convey to the citizens is we don't want to just senselessly or carelessly raise taxes. We want to make sure that we're protecting our fund balances and that we're trying to protect the needs of the citizens without having to cut services. Because from listening to a lot of the citizens, they want to be able to keep the same services. And thank you for your time. And of course, we'll be more than happy to speak to you after everybody reviews their slides. Thank you, Mayor.
So I'm gonna tag in for Danny since he's not here. These were his slides. These are some basic overviews of the general fund to give you some percentage perspective. And so this fund, remember, general fund is what your tax dollars are paying for your property tax. So in this, you think about things like recreation, police, fire, EMS, some of public works, all of admin, finance. Those things are being paid for in the general fund, IT, support. So that one is your heaviest one on personnel. It's because it is a service. This is intended not to make money. You don't make money running Parks and Rec. You don't make money providing IT for your departments. That's not what they're there for. So these people are there to provide a service. So 33% into operations, 60% personnel, only 7% in capital outlay, which is not horrible, but definitely not at the number that we probably would want to be at. From a revenue perspective, you see most of that is state shared and collected, which is taxes. And then our little bit of Powellville property or state shared and collected are the ones I talked about earlier, like enterprise funds and all that. I shouldn't say enterprise funds. The enterprise account that we used to receive for utilities in our right-of-ways. Property and motor vehicle tax make up 48% of that. So what you pay for your cars, your trucks, your trailers, your house, that makes up the majority of that account. And then about 13% we get through fees, permits, things like that. If you rent a picnic shelter, if you got a building permit, anything like that. All right? This is just an overview to show you that cuts happen before it even gets to the board. So the department themselves cut $1.8 million out of the budget as a part of getting it to the board to try to provide the same level of service without increasing taxes or at the lowest tax rate that they possibly could. And this is just an example of some of the things. This is not comprehensive, but we look at things like in administration, where can you save money, finance. Some of this is training cuts. Some of it is reducing legal line items. IT, for example, you might stall purchasing equipment. Maybe this was a year where you were going to do a bunch of computers or laptops. You say, okay, we're going to wait one more year in order to reduce that number. Sometimes it's equipment you're not buying. You get down in streets and maintenance and garage. Sometimes that's, it might be that we need a new scanner for vehicles, but we say, okay, we're going to push that a year and take the risk on that. What I say is everything that you see in a cut, whether it's one of these examples or something else, cuts are always a risk assessment. So if you're willing to cut something or not pay for it, you're accepting the risk that thing may not fail for the next year. You're willing to go one more year with it. A perfect example is we've had trucks that are 20 years old that still happen to be driving, and the board says it might be on its last leg, but the people driving that truck are not responding to emergencies. We're going to take the risk one more year on that truck. Sometimes it works. We happen to get one more year. Sometimes the truck blows up mid-year and the board has to buy a truck anyway. But every cut is a risk assessment. And so this is just a sample of some of those cuts. $1.8 million worth, which is 19 cents on the tax rate. If you go back to the $99,000 per cent of tax. All right? And then if we look at water and sewer, these are funds that, again, are enterprise funds. The state requires us to run them like a business. So what you pay for your water is supposed to pay for the cost to provide the water. So if you look at this, your personnel and operations are much different. Because of business, you're spending 50% in operations, 46% in water. And in sewer, 75% in operations, only 24% in personnel. Those capital outlay numbers are very, very small. That is because those retained earning accounts, as you saw a minute ago, are small. So the money that we're spending on capital has to be limited based on the resources that we have. Because capital outlay is things like buying a new piece of equipment, buying a huge truck, backhoe, something like that, a Vector truck, or planned replacements of your capital projects, like a massive sewer line project that might be in your capital improvement plan. All right, next slide. I don't actually know when to stop on Danny, so y'all got to tell me. Is this you now? Okay.
Good evening. I'm up here alone, but I'm not afraid. That's my joke for the night. You're supposed to laugh. I'm glad you did. Anyway, okay. Proposed utility bill. The average low usage for the citizens is 3,000 gallons per month for a single family or a couple. The average use is 5,000, and the high usage average is 9,000. And if you look at the chart, if you're 2,000 gallons a month, you're going to pay $115.57. The proposed is for the coming year, it'll be 137. But we use the 3,000 because that is the low average of most houses in Havelock. Your average is going to be 129 for this year. Next year it'll be 154. And if you're the big average is 5,000, as you can see, is 190.56 because it goes by all of it goes off of your usage, and now it'll be $222.62. Solid waste, that's contracted through GFL, and they basically set our rates, and I believe they're going up this year on their contract. Am I right, Mr. Mayor? Okay. stormwater. Everybody, I did have one question about that earlier today. Stormwater is something that we're mandated to do it as a city. It doesn't mean we're just mandated to do it, and we got to find some way to fund it. And the way we funded it, come up with is $4 per household. So, I don't have to go to the next slide. The current rate is for one ERU, which is basically the equivalent residential unit. And for all houses in Havelock, it's the same. It doesn't matter how big your house is or how little your house is, you get charged one unit. Where the big difference comes in is the commercial rate, is that for every 2,500 square feet of a business, they got to pay an ERU. So it's $4 per 2,500 square feet for a business. So you can imagine what Walmart's stormwater bill is. Next slide. All right, utility rates. Our system, as you can see on the slide, is 40 to 70 years old, depending on when your housing community was built. There are a lot of different types of materials from 50 years ago, 60, 70 years ago, than there are things that were built 20 years ago or 40 years ago. We have 80 miles of sewer main, and all that is made of many different materials. Some cost more to repairs than others. And as the mayor was explaining what capital outlay means, you know, that is what we use for our funds that are the earned. I'm gonna mess this one up. Not capital outlay, but our funds for that. I always forget the name of it. The earned income, retained earnings. So part of that comes from it's basically a savings account for your rainy days, to put it in small, easy terms. Havelock's utility system is significant and aging, as I said, combined with a limited growth, which is a big thing. We're kind of landlocked. I know you're going to say, how are we landlocked? Well, we have the base and the Neuse River, basically, and then we are surrounded by national forest. So it's hard for us to grow out any way, left or right, and out to the west or south. So what we got to do is try to grow within what we have. So the combined limited growth and the cost of maintaining, replacing the infrastructure has to be spread relatively small customer base. So like everybody's, why is our tax rate so high compared to other, just the rate? And I know the mayor explained to you what the rate is. It really matters what you pay. But let's just say that we have a water break or a water main break here in Havelock, and they have the same water main break in Moorhead. And let's, just for number's sake, the repair costs $100. They have 20 people to pay for that, so it costs them each $5. We only have 10 people to pay for that. So it costs each of our 10 people $10. So, but you're getting the same repair, you're getting the same material, you're getting the same work. So that's one easy way to look at it. Next slide, please. Solid waste, as you said, the rates are going to go up for the fees and the gas and all of that. So the rate we're going to adjust. We've been doing this for a little while, but our expenditures of this is only for 28% of the personnel. 58% is all operating costs, and 14% of your capital outlay, basically your savings account. So right now you pay for the current resident $24.84. Proposed is going to be less than a $2 increase on your solid waste per month. And if you're a commercial, it's still a little bit over $2 as the rate goes for the upcoming budget. Your stormwater, there's no changes to your revenue. As you can see, that the expenditures for that is 41%, 23% for operating costs, and 36% for your capital outlay, because there's a lot of other equipment that goes along with making sure your runoff, whether it's man-made or we make sure that what is man-made gets to the natural estuaries to push the water out to where it goes. that we have to have a little bit more equipment to do that. And there's no rate increase for that this year. Next slide, please. As you saw in one of the other slides, for the Tourist and Event Center, we're going to go up about 10% on all of our rates. This is one of those ones that the Tourist and Event Center, every year we have to add money to it to keep this beautiful facility open. And as you can see, the 50% of the expenditures are for personnel. We don't have really a whole lot of people that work here in the Tourist Event Center in comparison to other places, but they do a phenomenal job. And this place is kept up phenomenally. It's amazing, and it's clean every time you come here, and every event they have here is done with the utmost professionalism that I've ever seen. So, and 46% is your operating cost, and only 4% of your capital outlay, because of all the other things we've done in years past to keep the improvements up on this building. We've done a very good job as a city keeping this building up to where it needs to be. And again, the majority of expenditures is personnel and operating expenses. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Canty for the next set of slides.
Good evening. So the next couple of slides I have, understanding that a city cannot just run on the taxes that we receive from the citizen alone. We also actually go out trying to obtain loans and grants, and those could be my next couple of slides I'm going to cover. I'm going to cover right now our debt slides. Currently we have 6 USDA loans and 1 state loan. As a municipality, there are strict guidelines that we actually have to follow before we are even approved for these loans. So we have to basically follow these guidelines to make sure that one we can pay back the loan that we receive. And for being good stewards of the taxpayers' money, we've obtained, again, like I said, 6 USDA loan and 1 state loan, and we've been responsible in paying all of our loans back in a timely manner. And over the last 3 years, 2023, we repaid a sewer annex loan, the water plant loan in 2024, and we also paid off our fire truck in 2025. So we are being good steward of the taxpayers' money when we do receive it. Like I said, these are some of the things that we help to go out and get to help ease the burden on the taxpayer, because trying to buy a fire truck, I think one fire truck is almost like $1.2 million, if I'm not mistaken. I can correct that number at the end of this right here. Next slide. Current grants. There are also some things that we actually have to do to actually to go out and grab to apply for grants. Currently, we have over 17 million in grants right now. We're also pending a McCarter Canal grant that's going to be another $6 million basically added to the city. Now, these grants, they can't be used to lower the tax, but they are used to basically specific projects that are here in the city that we're trying to take care of. And also our Parks and Rec, they just completed their Parks and Rec master plan. That's going to allow us to apply for additional grants for the Parks and Rec. So we're looking forward to that in the upcoming year now that our Parks and Rec master plan has been completed. But no, these grants pretty much allows the Havelock to address major infrastructure needs, basically help us with public safety, recreation, water, sewer, and stormwater projects here in the city for these grants. So if there's a grant out there for the city of Havelock, we're going to aggressively go after it and try to get it to help alleviate some of the burden on the citizens of Havelock.
And just one clarifier, Tyrone, the master rec plan is still in process. We have completed the contract. Okay. So it is let and the contractor is working it. Matter of fact, one of your first opportunities as citizens to give input into that will be Friday. They're doing it in conjunction with our concert Friday night. So you'll have a few opportunities to give input to the master rec plan. Then it will be completed and adopted by the board, and it can be used to get grants and things like that.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Mayor. Next slide, please, sir. So we've seen these slides. This right here is what we are proposing right now. This is this is a proposal. The budget right now is looking at to be at a tax rate of 75 cents. That's 1 cent property tax, generating $99,380. Average home basically is 186,300. Read up there. Our vehicle tax, 1 cent, basically bring in 15,405, with a total estimate tax value of $114,993. Permit fees increase generally to 3.3% CPI, basically following the guidelines. And our enterprise funds, water increase 15%, sewer increase 20%, solid waste 7.5%, and no change to our storm water. And then our tourist and event center is 10%. Next slide. Which rounds everything out as our proposed budget. And again, this is just the proposed budget. Our budget workshop meeting that's going to take place on the 10th, which is this coming Wednesday, is also open to the public. You can get to come to see how we're tightening the screws down to basically come up with a final project for the city of Havelock to continue to be good stewards of the taxpayers' finances. 3 cents tax increase, average home as again, 186,300, an additional $55.89 per year, or $4.66 per month. Next slide. And I believe Commissioner Wilson will come up and cover our next couple of slides. Thank you.
I'm the oldest, so I get to talk about history. How did that happen? But I've been on the board long enough to see all of those numbers. And you can see we went through 7 years where we did not raise taxes. But in 2023, we had a listening session just like tonight where the citizens said, we don't want this big increase. Can you do it a little bit at a time instead of one big? Sometimes cutting just a cut is bad. But we tried for a long time to stay balanced and not increase, but you can see the world we live in today, so much has increased. Inflation has hit us not only in gas, has been talked about, but buying the product to take care of your water, to take care of the sewer, all of those things, Parks and Rec, we can't get along without new trucks, new police cars, new fire trucks. All of those things have to come as part of being a city. We have, like I said, we tried for 7 years. We were able to not have a tax increase, but however, you've seen that we've had to go forward with that tax increase. Next slide. Our utility funds, this is actually the one that scares me the most. If you look at 2026, we are at $2,600,000. We spent this year so far $2,000,003. If we have a year like this year, we're going to be in trouble. I don't know any other way to say it, but the grand total of our funds keep going down. We have explained again the costs going up with each and every year as to operating those systems and not having an increase of our tax budget like many other municipalities have, because we haven't had the growth. We do have hopes and plans for additional growth down Lake Road, additional growth out towards Stately Pines as the I-42 happens. But that's not going to bring an answer soon. So know that those things are being talked. We're talking with developers, but it's not a quick fix. So next is Tom Tant. And I was happy to see him tonight because he's going to give you, did you want to? Okay. So anyway, Tom has been our city engineer for a long, long time. He's with Hazen and Sawyer. I can't remember many projects that we have that he is having some influence by. So this is Tom Tant.
So y'all might be wondering why we had Tom come out today. A lot of the questions we've gotten about water and sewer in particular over the last several weeks have been regarding how do you decide what you're doing with your system? Like, how are you planning for retained earnings? How are you planning your projects? Tom does not work for the city as an employee, as an engineer. We don't have that. Tom is on contract with us through Hazen and Sawyer and is very familiar with Havelock's been working on projects with us for a very long time. And the last couple years, the phrase that we've used a lot is called changing the trajectory, right? We all would love an easy button where you can just push it and say 70 years of sewer line just get repaired and we move on and you have a perfect system and you restart. It doesn't work that way. So when you find yourself in that situation, what do you do to try to solve the problem? And how do you expend your funds efficiently in order to change that trajectory to get you moving in the right direction? So Tom and his team have been integral in trying to build that. So he's going to run through a couple slides today to give you sort of what the board looks at when they start doing their risk calculations on how they decide their funding.
All right, thank y'all. Next slide. So this slide really here is intended to explain that we're trying to get in a proactive stance on the utility side of things. When you got water lines and sewer lines that fail, you're doing emergency repairs and you're doing them when you don't really want to be doing them, things are expensive. That's a pricey way to run a system. And so what we've been working on really since last year is to try to get, this shows a 5-year plan. This is not intended to go 5 years and stop. This is the first 5 years. But we're progressively going through a condition assessment, trying to identify what the problems are and really be in a more proactive mode. Now, the bad news is this. When you start looking for problems so that you can identify problems before they're real big, you're going to find them, all right? Then there's a need to address them. But the deal is, long term, if we address these in a proactive stance versus a reactive stance, at the end of the day, you got a lower cost. And so that's really what this sort of asset management trajectory is about, to try to be in a, again, more proactive stance. And just a couple of, I won't belabor this, but there's a plan for 2026, and so it does generate the needs for funds to stay on that program, but that's what's needed to try to get ahead of the game. I would also point out that we've heard discussion about the fund balances dropping, and when you get these repairs that cost a ton of money that you didn't see coming, it comes out of savings, and that's really what some of those downward spikes are a result of in the water and sewer side. All right, next slide. All right, so I'm going to change total gears here. I'm going to hop around a little bit, but that certainly is a big one, and that's really geared towards what I just talked about out in the system. We have a wastewater plan. All right, next slide. We did some work back in 2007 and said, okay, what do we need from a wastewater capacity perspective? And again, rock solid. But here's what's going on. Next slide. This chart, just all you got to care about is that in 2003 is the far left, 2026 is the far right, and it's going down to the right, right? And that downward trend, those are your wastewater flows. And so as we've gone through time and added people and added businesses and everything else, actually your wastewater flows are going down. And it's okay, well, that's a good thing. We're managing the I&I. That's a great story, and there have been some great projects that cause that. The next slide is kind of interesting. So again, we're not going to belabor the technical points here, but that red line going up, that's basically the strength and the pollutant load within the waste stream. And so that stuff's harder to treat. So the story is back in 2007 when we said, okay, we got a plan for the wastewater plant and how we're going to deal with that. That was based on assumptions that we thought were going to play out in 07. And things like this generate a greater need for wastewater treatment than was assumed. And so there's a lot of things in play behind the scenes beyond just your typical inflationary kind of drivers that drive the cost of water and sewer. And so that's, these are, just some factors that go into that. All right. And then the last slide that I'll mention, somebody mentioned IT earlier. So, and this is just an example, over at the wastewater plant, we've been talking about trying to get some improved controls and basically computer controlled type of equipment at the plant, because those types of things solve a lot of problems or can help prevent a lot of problems, and things that can, if you're not careful, can create a lot of expense on the city if things aren't caught in a timely fashion. So stuff like this is just another part of the philosophy that's going in to the planning for these facilities, just trying to stay ahead of the curve. So with that, I think that's the last slide I've got.
I actually asked for this part because in 2013, when I became a new commissioner, I took a tour of our sewer plant. And in our sewer plant, there is a 1950-something megathon box taking up room. We have tried to improve our system as we can, but as Tom mentioned, SCADA would do wonderful for our city. We've been able to get it for our water department, but we have not been able to get it for our wastewater. So I asked for sewer because I am a widow. I live alone. I know what it costs y'all to have your sewer treatment, but Havelock is doing everything we can with the money that we currently are getting. And you can see by the previous slide that I had that if we have repairs like we did this year, the retained earnings that we currently have will be much lower next year. So now I'm supposed to talk about personnel. So I'm off sewer and now to our wonderful people, because we do have a great staff that do so much for us. And as you can see, we are in competition with all of our neighboring communities. If they raise salaries and we don't, and currently all we're raising is COLA and longevity. COLA, just as the mayor said, if they buy a loaf of bread this year, COLA covers it to that it's the same loaf of bread, so that they're paying the same amount of their salary towards the loaf of bread next year. So we're just keeping pace with inflation. And the board had made a choice of dates, because originally when I was on the board, we started with whatever COLA was in January. Well, it wasn't always the same as it got to be March and April when we're actually doing the budget. So we are getting a later COLA date now than we did originally. I wanted to read this. This is our actual city policy. The city's COLA and longevity amounts are based on the Board of Commissioners' adopted compensation philosophy policy, which is intended to recruit, retain, motivate our employees. In addition, it is to pay all categories of employees at a competitive market area level. A cost of living adjustment, COLA, is a pay adjustment designed to help our employees keep up with inflation and rising living expenses. A COLA is not intended to be a pay raise. Rather, it's an adjustment designed to help our employees keep pace with inflation and rising living costs. Without COLA, an employee purchasing power an employee's purchasing power decreases over time as everyday expenses such as housing, groceries, fuel, and utilities become more expensive. So that is our board's philosophy. And I think any of you who are out there in the workforce, you feel the same way when it comes to COLA. You don't want to lose what standard you're currently at. And with that, I thank everybody for being here tonight, and I'm turning it back over to the mayor.
All right, so one thing I'm going to add to that slide is the 1.7 for longevity. Probably you might be wondering, how do we get to that percentage? 1.7 longevity is based on a lifetime retirement track at the city of Havelock. So if you come to work for us as a brand new police officer and you get paid your basic salary, if you stay for 20 to 25 years and you get 1.7 every single year, when you retire in that pay grade, you will have moved from the bottom of the pay grade to the top. That's just math to get 1.7%. The board can do whatever percentage they want every year, but they call it longevity because it's an amount of money that goes to that employee who stays here for their career. So it's about your longevity that here at the city of Havelock. All right, I'm going to run through a couple of next steps real quick, and then y'all can we'll talk about whatever you want. So we do have a workshop Wednesday. We talked about that at the beginning. You are always welcome at any meeting that the Board of Commissioners has, period. Every meeting is an open meeting. A workshop is not one that has a public hearing section or public comments or any of that. That's typically where the sausage is made. That's where the board will sit down and talk about all the input they get from you and decide what they want to do about this topic or any other topic. Budget adoption will be June 22nd. We already had our public hearing on the budget last Monday. So if you come on the 22nd and you want to talk about the budget, there is a public comment section at the beginning. You can talk about whatever you would like, and that would include the budget. If you had more input on the budget, bless you, they would adopt that on June 22nd, and the budget will become effective July 1. How can you get a hold of us otherwise? I think that's what our next slide is, Chad, which is you can check our website, and if you want to look at past budgets, they're on the website. And we gave you some highlights of past budgets, but they're on our website, or you can come in and get it from us anytime you want. We're on social media. Also, our meetings are at 7 o'clock, unless it's something special like this where we move it back a little bit to accommodate people's schedules. Workshops are the second Monday. Regular televised are the fourth. And the regular televised are where we have the public comment section where you can come up and speak about anything for 5 minutes to the board. And again, all of our meetings are open. I do have specific office hours set aside, Mondays 3 to 5 for any citizens. It's pretty heavily used. I always ask people to call ahead if you want to come in just to make sure that there's time in that 3 to 5 block. But I'll also meet with citizens, as a lot of you in this room know, any other time, if it's a Tuesday because you work Mondays or you need to meet at 5:30, whatever. I meet people at Bojangles, whatever you need to do, because we want to get you whatever information you need. And then I think that's kind of it, right, Chad? That's our last slide, and then we'll back up to whatever ones we need to go over whatever questions you have. So here's how we'll do it. We'll do it just like if you've been to a board meeting. We do it the same way. We're going to have you come up to the microphone for a couple reasons. One, so everybody here can hear you. Two, because we are Facebook Living this whole thing. I don't know if I just made that term up. We're on Facebook Live, whatever we're doing. And we're hooked into the microphone system. So if you're speaking in the mic, then people at home that might be watching this will hear your question. And then if you come up, state your name and address clearly in the mic, just like we do at a board meeting. So we have it for the minutes because we are officially in a board meeting. And then and then I'll be happy to answer whatever questions you've got, or we'll let the commissioners answer it if it was one of their slides and they'd like to answer it. And we can go back and forth. I'll go ahead and start with this reminder. Everybody up here pays the exact same bills that you do. We are not tax exempt. We do not pay utilities. We pay all the exact same bills. We're all required to live in city limits. That's the law. There are only 3 requirements to be a commissioner or a mayor. You have to be 21. You have to live in the city limits. You have to be registered to vote in the district you want to run in. That is true for all of us. We pay the same bills that we ask our citizens to pay. 2, you saw a little bit of what Tom mentioned today and you saw some graphs and you were like, what the crap am I looking at? I get it, because that's all a little bit foreign to you guys. That is the type of information that the board is dissecting and working through all the time for every decision that they make. Nobody here is lying to you about numbers. I do get frustrated when people accuse us of that. None of us get paid to do this job. We get a very minimal, doesn't even cover our time, stipend to be your elected official. There's no benefit for me to lie to you about how much money's in the general fund. There's no benefit for us to say, you know what would be cool today, just raise everyone's taxes and see if it makes them happy or not. So I just want to get out of the way that nobody on this board wakes up in the morning to try to find ways to piss off the community. Everyone's trying to do the right thing for the community. So, and everything does have a thought process behind it. Is the thought process right? We like to think so, but it doesn't mean we don't want your input to think about it from a different perspective. So with that being said, anybody who'd like to speak, please feel free to come up to the microphone and ask your question or concern, and we'll work through it the best we can. Who would like to go first? Come on up. Yes, sir.
Howard Hoffman. I live on Bobcat Circle. And my question is, what is the money that's used for the water runoff for? What does it do? Because in my home, the water that comes from the rain runs to the back of my property. I followed it one night, goes to a ditch, which leads to the Slocum Creek. So where's my incentive going? What's it paying for?
Sure, you can answer that. The $4 stormwater fee is what you're referring to, and what does that go to? So the money for us for stormwater goes directly into an account that gets utilized by our public works team to do stormwater work. And we have a stormwater director, and it's used across the entire city. So some of that money is used for specific large projects, like maybe cleaning out an entire set of ditches in a neighborhood. Some of it goes to general maintenance. So part of your question that I'm going to add to that is what's different than it used to be. So used to we did that with tax dollars. When we created the fee, that money is dedicated to that effort alone, and it allows us to be much more efficient about utilizing that money. So you know you have a set amount of money that comes in every year for that $4 from every house. And then when our team goes out and they start analyzing the ditches and doing the stormwater, it's a much more surgical approach to getting that done. So I don't know about your particular ditch in Bobcat, but I will say there are lots of ditches in the city of Havelock that were ones the city probably should have been cleaning, that we were not because we didn't have the funds or the plan to do so, that we are now cleaning. And I would say yours, if we had a specific question, we can just get Patrick to look at the map and figure out if that's your ditch, our ditch, and who's supposed to be cleaning it. But it also allowed us to jumpstart cleaning in some ditches that probably were citizen-required ditches, but they were not doing it. And they got so far out of hand that there's no way you could have done it as a citizen. We were able to take some of that money, go in and get it to the point where you can clean it now as a citizen so you can keep up with your own ditch. So that's kind of like the 10,000 foot. That's kind of what we do with the money. It all goes towards that stormwater work across the entire city. So even if your own house, you don't see it, it's happening in a further drainage situation down from your house or somewhere in your neighborhood. Yes, ma'am. We have to have a stormwater plan, right? They don't mandate that we have to charge for the plan, but you have to have a plan. And if the plan doesn't meet certain criteria, they can come in and force you to charge people money. We decided to be proactive, and that's because we're in one of the 20 CAMA counties, which there are 20 waterfront counties. We are one of them, so we have to follow those rules. Yes, sir.
Melantha Amos, 214 Grove Lane. Lake Road is been developed with the bypass. Does the city of Havelock control Lake Grove before it turns in 9 Mile? And I ask because sometimes there's potholes right there or the grass isn't cut along the sides. With the development of the bypasses, a lot of traffic coming down there now. I noticed that we have more police presence to try to slow the traffic down when they make that left turn off of the bypass. So I wondered who is responsible for the maintaining of that road from Lake Road to 9 Mile for the grass and for the potholes.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for noticing that we've increased the police presence out there since the bypass opened, because our team has been doing that aggressively. If I'm not mistaken, Patrick, all of Lake Road is DOT. So all of Lake Road from Miller to the bypass is owned by the North Carolina Department of Transportation. So if we have potholes in there now that we know about, we do forward those along and ask them to make the repairs, and that would be their right of way that they would be managing. Correct, Patrick? There is a project coming. I don't know the extent of it, but after the bypass is fully complete, they are going to do some work up and down Lake Road. There's going to be some changing of the road and widening to make it a little bit safer, along with those, with some of the right-of-way changes. And I think you brought up a good point, too. So when we say roads are not ours or they are ours or whatever, it does matter, like, who's paying for the road. So in this case, I think your example is perfect. It's DOT's job to pay for maintenance, but our police department is still who's enforcing the laws on the road.
My name's Mary McCarthy. I live at 140 South Forest. As you know, it flooded there really bad during Florence. And there's a ditch, I believe it's Bear Claw Creek or something that goes in the center of the road. There are cattails and weeds taller than I am growing in there. And it seems to me they had to boat people off my street. Maybe they should consider doing something about that ditch. And the second question, the bypass. You know, I live at the very back, and there's woods, but you can still hear the bypass. It's really loud. Are they going to put any sound barriers up? Because, I'm used to the airplanes. I'm used to the railroad, but I'm not used to traffic 24/7. So I didn't know if that was going to, as where I live, you can see the headlights of cars getting on the eastern side of Havelock and getting off, and the racket you wouldn't believe.
Sure. No, ma'am, I do not believe DOT has any plans for sound barriers.
I didn't think so.
I'm 99% sure they have none.
Throw it out.
I know the original project did not. And then to your first question, and Patrick will straighten me out if I get this wrong. We did go in and do a massive clean out of that major ditch that goes through the middle of South Forest.
Yes, but that was back
after the storm. So
men were standing in water up to their chests in their homes, and we're not on the floodplain.
yes, ma'am. And so when we cleared that out, I'm pretty sure some of those ditches are ones that are really supposed to be the owner maintaining them, not us. And some of that is about whether or not we have easement or right of way on the original deed. And so we did the initial cleaning, and I think they're supposed to be mowing down to the bottom of the ditch, and some do and some don't.
Wow.
Is that correct, Patrick? Yeah, so
It's looking rough, and when cattails are as tall as me, I'm 5'1". That's a big cattail.
so they do go through once a year. Patrick, you want to add it? You're good. So they do go through once a year in South Forest and do the ditches that we have control over to try to keep them down.
This is in the center part. You know, it's just a
Yes, ma'am.
big loop, and there's the big culverts that go through, and it goes in between two sides of the road. My house didn't flood, but heaven knows it was one of the few on the street that
Yeah, only the 5 or 6 of you on the hill back there didn't flood.
Yeah, I'm one
Yes,
of
ma'am.
those folks, thank God. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Steve Loibel. I live at 907 Coyote Trail, Wolf Creek. And I got a question just out of curiosity. They laid new blacktop roads going into Wolf Creek, but they only did half of it. And was there a reason? I mean, it looked really nice, but they didn't do our cul-de-sac. I think the one next to us, they did the two cul-de-sacs coming into Wolf Creek. But I was just wondering, basically they did 50% of the job. I just was wondering why they didn't finish it.
Yes, sir. So we can look at a spreadsheet to get the exact answer, but I can give you the general answer. So we are very surgical about how we pave. So what we do is we have a spreadsheet, and it's got all the streets that we have responsibility for. And then Patrick's team, we hire a contractor to do a pavement survey, and then our team goes out and verifies that. So if they tell us we grade A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever. Then what we do is we pave based on that. And then he takes the percentages. I believe we use 60-40 right now, 60% towards repair, 40% at full depth. So there are times where we get halfway down a road, and that was a D road, and then it turns to a B road, and we stop paving. And then we move to somewhere else that is a D or an F.
Why they want to be
You might be on a B road. And so what I would say is we could actually tell you, we have a spreadsheet, and I'd be happy to, me or Patrick would sit down with a spreadsheet with you, and we can look at your road and say you are graded currently at a B minus or a B plus, and then that would be why we would stop. For example, Forest Hill Drive, they did the first 200 feet 3 years ago, and that's where we stopped. And the other part didn't get done for 3 years because it was still high enough grade.
Okay, so I bought a house that is rated F. Oh, no.
Yeah. So so just to go back to Powell for 1 second, since we're talking about it, when you saw that Powell fund, it goes like this. It does that because we do our paving every 2 years. So we learned after Florence, because we had to skip a year, we learned that if you spend $1 million or more, you get way more bang for your buck than if you spend $500,000 a year on paving. We thought we were doing the right thing, spending $500,000 a year on paving. But when a company comes in to mobilize, $500,000 goes this far, but $1 million takes you like 3 times further, not just twice as far. So we have switched our policy to paving every 2 years. Like this year, we're spending 2? Almost 1.4 if you count utility cuts, 1.18 or something on just streets. So we're spending a dramatic amount of money on paving, and you'll see a lot of progress happen. We won't pave anything except repairs for the next 2 years. Then we'd go back out with another $1 million contract. All right? Who else? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Bounce around, don't mind if Mr. Chad could go, I think, to slide 9 or 10.
Sure.
I know it's way back in the front. Oh, actually, to slide 10, please, sir.
That one?
Yes. So I was just trying to figure out.
I know we all know because your name and address under the medium-sized American flag. I remember, but go ahead. And
Troy Ellis on Nottingham Drive.
Thank you, Troy.
But for the 3, or I guess 4 columns with the 3 numbers, the actual, I guess, is what you guys actually have if we go over to the bank. That's what the teller will tell you that we have. The budget is, and the proposed is, I guess I'm getting a little gunged up on what those are.
So actual for 24-25, that's what the bank would tell you actually spent out of your account.
Oh,
so
okay.
that is the legit, audited, completely finalized 24-25. So we finish our budget the next month we go into audit, and by the end of September, October, we've got an audit. That's when we call it complete. Okay. So this would be like if your accountant did your books for 24-25 and said that's what you spent. The middle one is what we think we're going to spend by the end of this month. And that's pretty accurate. What would change? God, I shouldn't even say it out loud, but let's say a water main, he not too. Let's say a water main broke right now while we were in here. So that water line, that water fund number instead of 4.4 might become 5.1, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen in the next 3 weeks. So that is what we're pretty sure this year's budget, that's what we budgeted, and that's what it should come out as. And then the last one is what we're expecting next year's budget to be. Did that clear it up, Troy?
Yes. All right, thank you. And then I guess we'll go back because my big thing is our water and sewer. And maybe one day y'all will give me a tour of the treatment plants because I've been wanting to see what they look like. But I guess whatever percentage we raise it at, I told it to Mr. Larkin, our commissioner, whatever y'all raise it at, I guess I'll ask that if it's the 20% or 15% or 10% or whatever in the world it is, if we could have that, if it's the 20%, because it's a nice round number, if that could all go into repairing the sewer system. Not that the ladies and gentlemen that work for that division don't need a pay raise, but if we could just shove that straight into fixing the pump houses, the main system lines, and the neighborhooding system lines, I think that would be nice. And I guess since we're proposing somewhere around the $8 million, is there like a spreadsheet of what neighborhoods we're looking at getting either repaired or remodeled, or pump houses that are getting fixed up?
For the sewer fund in particular?
Yes.
Not exactly. I would say that we would be able to provide so we do it a couple ways. We have like an M&R line, which is what we expect to pay in maintenance and repairs.
Okay.
Some of that is we don't know what's going to break, right? And so we're just prepared to fix things that are going to break, that are unknown. But Patrick typically does have a spreadsheet of things that we know we're preparing to do, maybe an upgrade at the water plant or something like that, or maybe some lines that we know are going to get replaced. So it'd be a mix of the two. But yes, we could get you that depth of information out of the budget if you would like it. Yes, sir.
Okay, and then I guess I'll finish up with this question because I got to talk to Miss. I'm sorry I forget your name.
Brenda.
Miss Brenda. She was talking. I got to talk to her at the front door as I was speaking to people up there, and I guess aside for our sewer lines themselves, they're getting old and worn out. I guess we repaired or overhauled our water plant 13 years ago, 14 years ago, but I guess we weren't able to raise up the funds for the actual waste treatment plant. I guess because I guess we're trying to beat them both to the ground before one of them fails. Is there any looking into if that's down the line of being able to fix that? Because if that fails, it doesn't matter if we have brand new sewer lines if we can't actually manage it.
Yes, and I would guess there's a couple things you're talking to specifically, probably SCADA. Is that what you're going to say, Brenda?
Manhole repairs now instead of just fixing a project, because we found so many different lines buried, as he said, 20 feet deep, all sorts of different things. So whenever we do a repair, we do it manhole to manhole. So that at least we're making headway with getting our city, I hate to say fixed, but we're trying to get it fixed.
So the one thing that's happened at the water plant that we've been unable to do at the sewer plant aggressively is the SCADA system. And y'all heard that phrase get dropped earlier. SCADA is, I don't remember what SCADA stands for. What's that? System control and data acquisition. It's when computers run your stuff. And so that's how I say it. So at the water plant, for example, we have a computer system that's monitoring every valve and the system as a whole. So if our folks are sitting at home that work for the water plant on duty at 1 o'clock in the morning and a water line blows out, this has literally happened, on Nunn Street, and the road's starting to float away because you've got a water main flowing, they can pull their iPad out, hit a button on the iPad, and shut that water off from the plant so that we don't blow the road out. It also is giving them real-world data, real-time data all the time about the plant. So they can see that data. They can operate the plant much more efficiently. You can have things turning on and off by plan. Our sewer plant has very, very little of that. Our sewer plant is still employees dropping into holes and manually turning valves or manually opening gates, things like that. We do have a plan for that. It's about funding. We have done some major plant improvements. Chad, fast forward to, I'm going to say slide 19-ish, 18, 17, something like that. Keep going. Keep on going. 2, 3 more. Keep going, keep going. I was way off. Keep going, keep going. There. Okay. So if you look at these numbers, some of these numbers of capital outlay were at our actual sewer plant. Particularly, and I've got the sheet back there, I can pull it out, but 23, 24, we did some major repairs on the influent pumps and things like that in the plant to modernize them. So we are doing that as we go. But to your point, our plant only has so much capacity before we get to a point where we've got to do a major upgrade at the plant, and that's going to be very expensive.
All right.
Did I get that okay, Tom? Okay.
I think that was all of my questions, so thank you, sir. Ma'am.
Thank you, Troy. Who else? Yes, ma'am.
Carla Liner, 203 Cambridge Court in Westbrook. When we bought our house, 1985, we were not in the city limits. We were in the county. We didn't want to live in the city. We were forcibly annexed. I wish you'd never annexed us. This is all great. Nobody's talking about 60% of the budget is personnel. You're giving them 3.3 plus 1.7. In North Carolina math, that's 5%. Who the hell else is getting a 5% increase? And I understand the 1.7, yeah, that's great. Give it to them every year. They're supposed to be working. I'll go to the police department because that was my field. You start out as a patrolman. You want to be a corporal, then you want to be a sergeant. You're getting pay increases as you get promoted. You're not going to be the same thing the whole time. So I think we need to cut some fat in the personnel, and that will save the rest of us. Thank you.
Okay, so a couple of things. One, I would say the only place personnel is at 60% is in the general fund itself, nowhere else, which is only one small portion. Our total personnel in the city of the budget is not 60%, only in general fund. Two, that 1.7, if you're not getting promoted, that argument only works if you have promotional slots. So every department we have is very small, and they look like this. So you have a department head. Most departments don't have an assistant. Most of the time, we don't have multiple leadership positions underneath. So it is normal for a patrolman or patrolwoman, no matter how old or young they are when they come to us, to not get out of being a patrol officer by the time they retire. Because we only have 4 sergeant slots plus an investigator sergeant. That's 5. Then you have 2 captains and 1 deputy chief. And you have 29 people in that department. We count telecommunicators, over 30. So to say, I mean, you got 7 slots for 26 people to move into. Everybody's not moving up through the department. So the 1.7 makes sure they're getting paid every year. I would also add that in the city of Havelock, if you were to, nobody wants to talk about this, but if you compare what all of our employees get paid and compare it to Moorhead and compare it to New Bern and compare it to Carteret County and Craven County and everybody else around us, we are the lowest, period. Period. What does a police officer get paid right now if we hire a brand new police officer? 45, 46? Brand new officer? $47,000 to be a brand new police officer right now. What do they get paid in Moorhead? 57. So if you want to work in Havelock, you're already getting paid $10,000 less than if you want to go work in Moorhead, which, by the way, is only a 15-minute drive. And then to say they don't rate a 1.7% increase to keep them moving along their pay scale, I don't think that's a fair conversation. And by the way, if we look at this, everybody is doing at least the percentage we're talking about, and that is North Carolina math in every municipality and county around us. And some of them do it different. We do longevity because our board has not had an appetite for merit for years, right? Merit's difficult. It's a challenging thing. Other municipalities do merit, and they get paid a higher percentage on the back side than the front side. Some of them do it in one-time sums. The board could change that, but if your employees don't get 1.7% for their longevity every year, that is a raise. That is a raise. The 3.3 is a COLA. I understand, we all can agree it means the check looks bigger. But I think we all understand inflation. If you didn't understand inflation before 2026, I bet you get it now. Right? So if you understand inflation, you know what they got paid a year ago is not buying the same amount of bread that it bought today. The 3.3 says your $150 you got in your check is now still $150, even though it looks like $160. That's inflation, right? That's all the 3.3 is. The 1.7 is an actual raise. That is true. 1.7% of their total salary goes to a raise in order to keep them moving through their path. The board does not have to do that. That is absolutely correct. They don't have to do that. But it is... And you could say, because I've had this argument given to me 100 times, well, I don't get that at my house. Well, you don't work for me. You don't work for them. I don't know what Walmart's paying their people. I don't know what you're getting on your retirement. I mean, we can look it up and see what Social Security is going to do and what your federal government retirement's going to do, and it's going to be 2% or 2.8 or 1.3 or whatever it is every year. But it is their responsibility to take care of their 140 employees. And I don't think it's unreasonable at all to say 1.7%, which equates to about $150,000 in your general fund to cover that. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. And I think if you want to cut a budget, cutting it on the backs of your employees is not the way to make sure that you have a healthy city in the city of Havelock. You want to retain good people. You want them to be able to do their job and love doing their job. You want to have, I mean, look at the employees that are here today. I don't know if there's anybody here that's been here less than 15 years in the room except for one. I mean, people come here and they stay because they love the city of Havelock and because we try to do the best we can to treat them right. And say we're not going to give you an increase year over year to make sure you can still buy the same amount of bread is not telling your employees you want them to stay. I mean, that's a culture thing. I could preach on and on about it. Some of y'all heard me preach about it plenty. But I think if there's one thing, if you want to cut something, we can find plenty of things to cut for 150. That would be an impact to everybody in this room. That will be short term compared to long term. And I think cutting your employees is long term. And one more point I'll add, you have 140 employees. For a city our size, everywhere else in North Carolina, they're averaging well over 160 to 180. We are incredibly lean in employees. The city of Jacksonville city of New Bern has more police officers than we have employees. And they're only a 10 to 12,000 population more than us. You have 26 sworn officers. They have 130 sworn officers. All right, what else y'all want to talk about?
Mayor Lewis, Jim Schmidt, 437 Fox Hunt Lane. Back to the grant thing that we talked about earlier. Have we received those grants, or they've been applied for?
So that's received or being executed on. So hit that one for me, Chad. So this number for the last 3 years has consistently been over $20 million in grants. And so we get a lot of comments from the public about get some grants that'll reduce our costs. Well, we're executing, that $17 million is what we are executing on today, and we will execute on this year. That's not applied for, that is received. Oh, okay. And so here's the way grants work. Let's say that Phoenix Park, $1 million. We've been told we'll get the funding. We do the process, we do the work, then they give us the money back. So part of the reason you got to have money in your general fund or retained earnings is we have to front. We're going to front $17 million, and then they'll pay us back in incremental pieces as we finish the project. So these are all ones we're expecting. That $6 million we're approved for. We're just waiting on HUD to send us at the bottom where it says currently waiting on paperwork for an additional $6 million. That's another McOtter Canal project. That's $6 million. We have been approved. It's in the federal budget, so we know we're getting it. We're just waiting on HUD to send us the appropriate paperwork to fill out to start the process.
Okay, one more question. AMI metering, is that complete for the city?
Yes, sir. AMI is complete. Matter of fact, on that slide we had that had the 22 and 23, if you'll go to that slide real quick, 23, one more. So that 22, 23, part of those numbers were your AMI metering. It's complete. Okay. And so if anybody, if you want to know if your usage is right, I'll tell everyone, we've done this with a lot of citizens. We can sit down and show you your usage day by day, hour by hour, week by week, and you can actually see where you're using your water, when you're using your water, and if there are ways for you to conserve.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Speaking of which, I'll just throw this out while you're thinking about if you have any more questions. On our website still, we have a usage calculator that we built after the listening session last year, because one of the questions was, if I want to reduce my usage and get that to the point where I can reduce my water and sewer part of my bill, what does that look like? We built a calculator on our website that if you go onto it and you take your bill and type in how many gallons you use, it'll give you your calculation. If you say, if I conserve 500 gallons, how does that change my bill? You change that number, it'll tell you what your water and sewer would be in that scenario. Or I've told citizens on the converse, if you got a bunch of family coming in because it's graduation for your kids, you know you're going to have 8 more people. Okay, if I go up 1,000 gallons, what's my bill going to look like next month? We built that calculator out of the response from the listening session a year ago. And I know for the first few months it got used a lot because I took a lot of meetings about it, and I know staff took a lot of meetings with citizens about it. So I'm just reminding you all it is there for your awareness or to play with the numbers. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, Melantha Amos. I was looking at something that a friend was texting me. Her question was, with all these changes and increases that we're going to be funding, do we have any plans to use some of these increases to help when we have these storms, particularly if we go to a snow situation that we did last year, how that's going to affect? Because it seemed the priority was the bypass, what used to be the main road of Havelock. Is that still a DOT issue, or is that a Havelock, Craven County issue, so that we can get those roads cleared faster without having to focus everything on the bypass, which we're not used to?
No, great question. So that was one lesson learned from this last Snowmageddon, which was DOT did the bypass really quick, and then Patrick had to strong arm some folks to get him to do they came through Havelock initially, and then they got busy and forgot. And so our folks had to remind them to come back and get their main roads cleared in Havelock. Some of this money in this budget will not go to any of that. I will say, with all caution, a new piece of equipment we are currently buying right now will come with a snowplow attachment. Don't expect we're plowing 46 miles of roads with that. That is so we can plow for emergency services, because Patrick and his team were out with a backhoe this last time just to get, because remember, y'all, we were all stuck at home, but our fire, police, EMS, our water, and our wastewater were immediately out in the field battling demons all day while we were safe in our homes or having snowball fights with our kids. And we were using backhoes to try to clear that area. That's not optimal. So this new piece of equipment does have a little snowplow. We will use it to plow. It will allow us to get our buildings open faster. So we'll be able to do City Hall parking lot, Tourist and Event Center parking lot, things like that, so we can get back to business quicker. But it will not be enough to do 46 miles worth. We did learn the lesson of maybe talking to DOT more proactively next time because of the bypass, and that is a part of his protocol now in that scenario, including for hurricane storms. We'll remind them, hey, we're down here on the other road. DOT will continue to own Business 70, as they call it now. We're not going to take that road. So DOT will continue to own Highway 70. City of Havelock taking that would be a very risky and expensive move, because then we would have to own that road. So we're going to let DOT keep that and just work with them on that road.
One more question I should ask earlier. Jim Schmidt, 437 Fox Hunt Lane. When is the NCDOT preparing are they going to pave the entire through the city? And I assume the work that's being done right now is in preparation for that paving, the curbing that they're doing along the sides of the roads, the new concrete work?
You're exactly right.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So DOT's been doing curbing work, if you haven't noticed, up and down Highway 70 and around Cunningham and all that for the last 2 months, maybe a month and a half. And they've got a bunch more spots marked. When they finish what they're doing on the east end and the west end, they are going to pave the entire city of Havelock. It'll be what they call mill and fill. So you've noticed on the east end of town where they're doing the new paving, they're grinding it out and matching it. When they do the center part of the city, if you were in Newport last year, they did it in Newport, all up and down Highway 70. There's going to be a piece of equipment that grinds up 2 inches of asphalt, puts it in a truck. They're either going to remelt it and put it back down, or they'll bring in fresh asphalt behind it so the road can't continually get higher. It will be aggravating for a little while. We're going to have 1-lane closures up and down Highway 70 on one side at a time while they do that. But they are going to do the entire city from East End to Slocum all the way to the Slocum flyover. So you'll have all new pavement. It's supposed to start in the next few weeks. They told us June. So they seem to be on schedule. I know they won't start till their curbing's done, until they can kind of move some resources off the ends. But they told us they would start in June. And I would say it's at least 30 to 40 days, Patrick, maybe longer, in order for them to complete that through Havelock. But that's why all your curbs and storm drains have been getting replaced. And while they've been doing a lot of it is going to happen at night. Thank you, Ray, for that. Thank you for the reminder. They are going to do a lot of that at night. And we always are very clear to them that our business hours in Havelock are not regular business hours. DOT reiterated that to us, that they always do stoppages. You can't be paving at 1500 to 1600 because that's when everyone's coming off the base. And they do know that, and they don't pave super early in the morning for the same reason. All right, what else? All right, so what will happen is the board's going to go into a workshop on Wednesday. That workshop is here, correct? So the workshop will be here in this building Wednesday, and they'll be talking about what they're going to do to finalize the budget and get the numbers in line. And then June 22nd will be when they actually approve a budget. And I know everybody appreciates your input and questions today, but you don't have to end today. I have office hours. You can contact all of us via the website. If you click the email button, you can get to all of us via email. I'm happy to sit down and talk to anybody that would like to. If you want to dig in a little deeper, we went a little further than 10,000 feet. We got a little bit deeper today, but we can get into the ad nauseum details if anybody would like to anytime you want to. All right, no more questions. Last call. All right, I'm going to have to take a motion to adjourn from the board. Motion from Cynthia, second from Mark. All those in favor? All those opposed? All right. Thank y'all all for coming, and we'll answer questions afterwards if you need us to.